shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shaft.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred!
Welcome to episode 428 of Current Seed, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, January 4th, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Normagon, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From Northrend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. As always, thank you for your reviews. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review with your podcast feed on your podcast feed of choice. That always helps other people find the show. So, we've got a pretty interesting life and ladder this week, I feel like.
Possibly in the Chinese proverb
service.
sense. As in, with the Chinese proverb being, may you live in interesting times. So, yes.
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Well, I've been sick both physically and emotionally this week. So I right after New Year's, I had a really hard time sleeping Monday night into Tuesday. And so I worked from home, and then I was, kind of like feeling a little bit off, but I wasn't sure if I was just like run down because I didn't sleep or whatever. And then around like 6 o'clock, so I should say this room that I stream from is very small and has no windows. It's a completely interior room, and it's got a heat vent in it. So it gets very hot in here. I'm usually running a fan when I'm not recording the podcast. And so like there was one time that I was streaming and the heat went out an hour into the stream, and I didn't notice until I came out of the stream like 2 hours later, and Maureen's like, why haven't you like stop the stream to go fix the heat? Because I was so warm in here that I didn't notice. So anyway, I was shivering, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. And it turns out I had 101 degree fever. So not COVID. Thankfully, it broke this morning, but probably the flu. Maureen she claims she wasn't sick. She claims it was allergies. So I caught her allergies apparently, but that's fine. But so before that I did get 11x this month with Reno Priest. Somehow I played until I ran into like a really frustrating series of games at the end of my stream Friday night and got to like 2,500 or something like that. And then tried to play Treant Druid the next day, went like 1-5 and dropped myself down to 3,000. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then like New Year's Eve, I was just jamming games just cause like, let me try. And I had a pretty good run with it. It was something like, I think it was like it was like 7-4 or 8-4, something like that. It was a decent win rate with the Reno Priest, because I was seeing like a ton of people were trying to climb with druids or rogues, and that's what the deck is good at, is beating druids and beating rogues. And I ended up coming in at like 1,800, and that wasn't. I mean, we had some people in Discord that said they got like 3,500 legend on NA and still got 11x, which is, I mean, we'll talk about the number of legend players. There were a lot more than usual, but that's pretty high. But yeah, we're gonna talk about Excavate Rogue, Mining Rogue, Thief Rogue, whatever you want to call it. And I made the deck yesterday. I named the deck What I Do for This Show. And proceeded to lose repeatedly. And the first game, I just posted a screenshot in our group chat that just said this is karma, because on turn 5, I had a Cobalt Illusionist on the board. My opponent immediately played. I don't even remember if they played the Symphony of Sins. Oh no, they played the Symphony of Sins directly, burned 6 cards, and burned Drilly right off the top. And I'm like, okay, great. This is starting exactly how I thought it was going to. So I played a bunch of that. I've had a very poor win rate with it. I played a bunch of Dragon Druid, getting myself up to Diamond 5, farming them. So that's the way that you do that. And that kind of stopped when I hit Diamond 5. I think just people are trying a lot of weird stuff, and Dragon Druid is very good at the things that it's very good at and not very good at the things it's not very good at. And the things that is not very good into are any kind of control deck, basically, which people like to play at floors. Go figure. So so I'm like floating around there, but I haven't really been like try harding. I'm gonna stream tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get to Legend tomorrow, but I'm not really super worried about it. I've also been putting a lot of hours into Baldur's Gate, so I'm like
Yes,
25
they
hours
finally
in.
got to you.
They finally got to
One
me.
of us.
Yeah,
One of
so-
us.
So I'm at the end of Act 1, and I'm walking around looking for this stupid mold for a shield so I can make it so I can get out of there. And I'm
You can,
But,
you can look it up. It's okay.
I did look it up. That's the problem. Is I looked it up. I know exactly where it is, and I still can't get to it. That's the problem. I have no qualms about looking stuff up. Like, this has convinced me that I am not a Dungeons and Dragons player at all, because my immediate instinct is to look up the solution to every problem because I cannot figure it out. And I am not creative enough to like work with the tools and try to figure it out. And yes, I know a DM would probably encourage in the right direction, but like that's not the way that I play games. Like, I play games to just experience the story and get through it, and I'm not interested in participating in how that comes to be. So I've been looking up the solutions to like a lot of stuff. Like, oh, okay, this is how you do that, because otherwise I just die and then I get frustrated and I can't go any further. So I know that I'm probably doing it wrong, but I'm having fun regardless. So that's fine.
One day, maybe on a bonus pod or something, I'll have to give my spiel on the combat as sport versus combat as war in like games, specifically tabletop RPGs. It's a very fun chat.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. And probably the answer to your problem, I don't remember where it is exactly, but Misty Step. Find a way to do that.
Oh, yeah. That's a thing I don't have.
Strength character with jumping is kind of equivalent in the game.
No, I actually got there and didn't, and they were by themselves, and I had no thieves' tools to get through the door that I needed to get through. And then I
That
was
is
sad.
one thing that has also made me sad in the game, is because you end up with so many ways of picking locks, and then you forget that it's like I think for me it was like not having a thing for disarming traps.
Yeah,
'Cause
this is
it's
the
a
same
different
thing.
kit.
And I mean, I did, and to my credit, I did have a bludgeoning weapon on Karlach, and I did try to break down the door, and that did not work. I was hoping it would, but that did not work. But I did try that before I gave up and had to go all the way back.
Oh gosh.
Well, and you, Megasa? Different part of
Well,
the game.
I also played some Baldur's Gate 3. I know this is not the Baldur's Gate 3 episode, although we do have to do one at some point. But finally got like properly into Act 3, because I had put it down for a while and then I kind of came back in. After that was once we got into this month. I did also finish. I was in the top 1K for a while last month, but then decayed to about 1500 and wasn't totally sure whether I would get the 11x, but did manage to get it. And we'll talk about that. So I was happy with that, because there'd been, since the expansion, not really had any really good finishes. And this was still not nearly, I had sort of a losing streak right at the end, but was still pretty pleased with it. And then I've been mostly playing different versions of Naga Priest. And then the other day, I'm queuing Naga Priest. Everything's fine. I queue into Edelweiss for the first time. Like, we realized we were not actually friends in client. So I sent her a friend request after. Queue in. I'm like, I think this is actually Edel. But then you sent me a note, so I knew it was you. And also said, I'm sorry in advance, which I knew meant...
That should just be the title of the deck, right? It's just, I'm sorry in
Sorry
advance.
in
That should be the name of it.
So of course I'm sitting there going, well, I know it's going to be Shambler into Coin, Scourge, Illusionist, because of course that's what it is. But there's nothing I can do with that information, which of course you like, you can freely tell me that and it doesn't help me at all. So she does that, fine, gets the excavates, gets the epic treasure that gives you that allows you to discover a 5-cost card and it costs 0, and gets this card that I rarely remember exists that has a battle cry and it swaps itself with a minion in your opponent's deck.
Which, by the way, that tells you how like generally not great the options were. It was probably like on average correct for me to take Dark Bishop Benedictus as just a 5/6 there instead of picking that. But I was like, these kind of suck. This actually has a battle cry. Let's see what happens.
This
I
has
mean,
a chance.
In fairness, against Megasa specifically, that could have been an insult.
The Archbishop Benedictus, yeah, you
Yes.
don't know how I'm going to take that one. Well, and of course, like, odds were that you were going to get like a 1/3, right? Because that's mostly what my deck is. But no, she got the Aman'Thul.
Nailed it.
Just nailed it. So, and not only do I have to face down this Aman'Thul, but I have 0 chance of drawing my own Aman'Thul to deal with it. I managed to, I might have conceded to somebody else, but I was like, at the very least, this is content, so I'm just going to stick it out. Managed to survive a couple turns until on 8, Eloise coined out a King Crush that she had gotten from the Aman'Thul, and then copied
one
it
does.
with +2/+2 with the Aman'Thul, and that was exact lethal. So,
Yeah.
so you know, and it had been a little hard to put on pressure before that when you have your minions being removed by all of the rogue shenanigans.
It sounds
So-
like you got Amon thrown down the stairs is what happened to you in that game.
I had been mad about some rogue games earlier, but I kind of couldn't be mad about this one. Like, not even just because it was Edel, who also did send me the sweat smile when Aman'Thul came out.
I mean, there's like a level of high rolling that's just annoying out of Rogue, and then there's a level of high rolling that's just like so far out of the stratosphere that you just have to have respect for it.
Exactly. I just had to have respect for it. Played more Nio Priest, did pretty well, and then the past couple days, I just like have not been able to buy very many wins, including with Thief Rogue, which I had named what you swore to destroy, as in you have become what you swore to destroy. And I did do my best to destroy it, to destroy its win rate by just losing horribly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you two just remained consistent. You were beating rogues, even just,
Yes.
you know, you were the rogue.
So I am definitely looking forward to learning more about playing this, but also my head has not really been in the game the past couple of days. But I do have life news, which is that I got engaged. So
Yay! Oh wait, hang on.
Congratulations.
Oh, I don't have the legendary. I need to have the
no.
legendary thing in there. No, I don't have all of it. I have to add it.
Or at least the cheering one. Yeah. we
Cheering?
gotta get
Yeah.
the bumps.
Well, hang on. We can. If you wanna hold on a second, I can get it added in. If you
Stand
give me
by.
a second. Yeah. Let's. No, I have it. I just need to find it in my computer because the downloads folder is terrible. Hold on. Oh my god, this is terrible podcast content. I am sorry for all of you who have to watch this on the
It's only the Patreon listeners and the people here. in
yeah.
Twitch chat.
Only the people who actually pay us money who actually oh my god.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got it there, but that wasn't the way that was supposed to go.
Look, they know that they're paying money for a worse product. We say it explicitly. That is, for whatever reason, this is the
Oh,
podcast
God.
content creation model, which is like, hey, we put out this polished, finished product for free where we edit it. But if you want an earlier, worse product, you can pay us.
but then you get behind.
Legendary!
There we go. I got
Thank
it. Hang on.
you.
Don't talk so I can get you so Edel can actually edit it in.
Whoa, legendary!
Okay.
Like, I am very excited, and it has definitely made it a little harder to focus on Hearthstone, as there's lots of details to work out. But yeah, it's something that we kind of talked about for a while, but really exciting to have it be official. And yeah, I was like weirdly nervous telling people because it was just like such a big reaction, but I am really excited about it. And so I'm sure you will hear in future Life and Ladders me complaining about the process of trying to make this happen. Early coin concede to my future mother-in-law, who is the most chill mother-in-law you could possibly have. It's like all of those horror stories you hear about. She was specifically like, I want you to make it as easy as possible. You're overthinking this. It doesn't have to be this hard. So that's good.
Very nice. Well, in terms of my life and ladder, the sleep saga continues. My wife is kind of losing her mind recently, so we're gonna try another approach because it had been going great, and then Leah learned how to roll over, and
Oh.
now
Yep, that's yeah.
now
Yeah,
she's
that's a
gotta
thing.
figure out how to sleep on her stomach. But during that time, that means that my wife, who had been taking the sort of second shift of the night, was like getting up multiple times because of that. And we're gonna try a new approach tonight, which is I will do the first feed as usual. My wife will do the middle one because it's the biggest in terms of quantity of milk that Leah eats, and then I will take the last one. So I have a lot of sleep medication to try and make sure I actually sleep during
Yeah.
the times when I have to, because if I don't, well, I'm gonna be up at like 5 a.m. or 4:30. So yeah, we'll see. I figure like she's losing her mind. I can ease that, and worst case scenario, I can always sleep during Leah's first nap of the day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll work it out.
You
But
both
that,
lose a little bit of your mind instead of one of you losing all of your mind, I guess. So,
yeah,
you know,
and
that's
I tend to be the one who does better with lack of sleep. That is to a point. I do get pretty irritable, but yeah, I mean, she's just been so stressed. So we'll see
yeah.
how this goes. Hopefully, this regression ends swiftly before we have to take other more drastic measures. We'll see. But yeah, that's the update here at about rough 5 months. So,
I mean, the good
and
news is that she will eventually sleep through the night. Like they all
one
do
day, yeah,
eventually. It's just
yeah,
a matter of how long it takes you. And then you will forget about all this until inevitably she wakes up in the middle of the night randomly after she'd been sleeping through the night, and then it'll be even more fun.
right. Yeah.
But you will get through this, and she will eventually sleep through the night. I can almost guarantee it.
One day,
Yeah.
I will no longer be sleeping on the couch. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is not this day. So, in terms of ladder, I was at the end of the month. I had been doing a lot of like stress grinding because I was so. There's a point where I'm comfortable, right? Where I'm like, okay, yeah, I fell a bunch. I'm now here at the 3,000. I don't love that, and then I'm at the 4, and then I'm
Yeah.
at the 6, and I'm like, I really don't want to hit 8. I really don't, when I'm in the 7. So I was like, I'm going to play Treant Druid, and I am going to concede at, the earliest signs of danger of like, this is not going my way. And I will just let those losses slide off my back because I can go into a next game and try and just steamroll, and that was pretty effective. It it might have. I think there's a point where rogues got better, that it was not working out as much, but at that point I had already recovered my rank successfully, and I did manage to end the month in top 1K, which was nice,
Yeah.
and had 11x for the first time in a very long time. Usually I end up 10x because I, play other things. I had played a bunch of Rainbow DK. That was not why my rank fell. That was other things. But I did not feel confident enough on like doing the grind with the Rainbow DK. It's a fun list though. Lots of ability to just push out stats out of nowhere. But I have since been going, okay, you know what? Let's see what this whole rogue thing is all about. And I messaged the rest of the crew saying, okay, I get why people like this deck because I started playing it when the new month arrived, and I hit a very early legend. This is not something I typically do. I think I hit it either yesterday or the day before.
It was like the day before. It was really
It was the
early.
day before. Yeah.
So yeah, a day 2 legend with Rogue, and I don't know that I had an incredible win rate, but 11x is seriously feels like cheating in terms of ability to climb quickly as long as you're winning more than you're losing. And the deck is dynamic and interesting, and I got to know it a whole lot better. Obviously, like with anything, you do get to know how you lose, and it was a little tricky, the fact that there were more dragon druids out because people heard that that's a counter, and I think to some extent Odin warrior as well, me a
Yeah,
counter.
I was
So
seeing a lot of those.
was hitting some of those, and I was like, oh, okay, bad matchup, do my best. But and I'll talk about this more in the rogue section. There is a method to the madness in terms of, you got to know matchups and figure out when you are looking for answers to what your opponent's doing and when you're looking for aggression, right? I think there was a game where was against an Odin warrior where I was like, as soon as I picked it, I was like, I should have taken a Colossus off of Jara rather than the weapon because they can just heal back up, and I need to keep pushing out threats because if they feel comfortable playing Odin, then things start to go badly for you because it's hard to find healing. And yeah, it feels like a deck that rewards lots of matchup knowledge and yeah, basically ability to know like what things you can find out of certain discoverers and what things to take based on that need. And sometimes you are going to miss. I think the biggest mistake certainly I see opposing rogues make sometimes, and sometimes it works out for them, sometimes not, is people will focus so much on the scorpion when it's like the worst
Yeah.
of the things because it's not discover, it's random. And if you're in a position where you are like, I need a random spell to bail me out, that's not a good position. Like, it's value, it's hopefully tempo because they are reduced in cost. But the things that I want to do over and over again are like Flint and Velarok. And man, I don't like Breakdance because it can be such a whiff in terms of hands where you're like, I have Breakdance and Shadow Step and nothing. I think that's why, Zacho cut it from his list. But I do get the appeal because games where rogues have Velarok is the number one win rate card in the deck. When they Velarok you and Breakdance it and get to keep a 3/6 very early in the game,
Yeah, that's
and then
backbreaking.
get to play it again and discover, and the things you can discover from Velarok are filthy. Like that.
I got a Love Everlasting from one today, and I felt right at home.
Oh man. Yeah. So we'll get into more about builds and approaches to the rogue later on. Ike has a different take that I'm trying out in the heroic Brawlicium with a one adjustment. But and yeah, there's a lot going on, and so to the people that honestly, myself included before, who are like, this is just random nonsense. I hate this. I probably can't convince you, but at least I can say there is skill there, right? Um, and for anyone that is like, I don't understand how to play this deck, I tried it and it worked terribly for me. Hopefully, can also provide some insights on how it works.
And we will
And if you
also-
just want to farm them and kill them, we will also tell you how to do that.
Yes, we have that
And it-
perspective as well.
And I will briefly tell you, if you want to farm the druids that are farming the rogues, play Naga Priest and just copy Shard of the Naru. And then they just... Is that dragon golems? That's cute.
Or just play Reno Priest and then just get rid of all their boards with successive board clears on every turn. And, yeah.
And
Works
that
for
gets
both
you the
dra-
good guy for sure.
It
I'm gonna
it
end up
absolutely does.
I'm gonna end up playing Reno Priest in the Heroic Coliseum and just getting
I-
bodied by Thaddeus decks. It's
No,
gonna
you
happen.
can beat Thaddeus decks. You just hard mulligan for Plague Spreader. Because what happens is that you kill off the
Okay.
Plague Spreader, and then the slime discards the Plague Spreader instead of Thaddeus. And then they concede. You don't even have to hit the Thaddeus. You just hit something, and the slime discards it because it's an undead. It turns into a 50-50, and they don't think of that. They guarantee do not even consider that when they do it because nobody aside from me and No Hands for like a day have been playing Plague Spreader. So
I was so sad today because as rogue, I faced one of the Thaddeus Warlocks, and I got off of Velarock that warrior spell that acts like a dirty rat that pulls something from their hand. I
Call to the
missed-
Stand. Yeah.
I missed it. I missed both it and the 5/3 that pulls it out, and I was like, come on.
yeah.
And then of course they were emoting at me, so
Mhm.
again, I was like, I forgot to squelch again, so
Yeah.
squelched them. But they did specifically say, as we were talking about a little before the show, the devs, when they made the changes to Sludge Lock, specifically said they did not want it to be an OTK. So we'll talk about
Yeah.
like balance
Well-
changes when we might expect that, but that is something that we could expect a change to, probably to Thaddeus himself some way, although it's not necessarily completely obvious what the best thing to do with that is. But I'm sure that they don't like the play your entire deck on turn 6. Your entire deck is free.
I mean, I liked my balance suggestion, which is just change the text box to Stalag and Fugue and get +1 attack.
Yeah. We can, revisit the chattiest subject when we get to slight hiccup in the Heroic Tavern Brawl, but
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no tournaments this time around, but we do have plenty of news, some of which sad, some of which maybe hopeful. So yeah, why don't you take us away, Wicked?
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Yeah, so we didn't think we were going to have much to talk today, and then we got a surprise announcement about the future of duels, which is that there is not one. So duels is coming to an end. It was a very short note that came out at 1:00 Eastern today as we're recording this. As we think about the future of Hearthstone and where the team can best focus their efforts, we've made the difficult decision to discontinue support for the duels mode. We do not have plans for any further scheduled updates for duels, and the mode itself is scheduled to be removed from the Hearthstone client in April 2024. This change will allow us to shift our resources to where we feel they will have the most impact, including traditional Hearthstone Battlegrounds and more. To that end, Battlegrounds Duos is scheduled for an upcoming Battlegrounds patch, and we're trying out some duels treasures in our next arena season. More detail soon. There were a number of questions on Twitter today and elsewhere about why duels is being removed whereas Mercenaries continues to exist in the client. The answer being that Mercenaries is effectively a standalone mode that can just exist in the client and has no dependencies on anything else.
Right.
Whereas duels is always getting influxes of new content with the new cards that are being printed.
Right.
And so if they continue to keep duels in the client, then they need to continue to support it. Even if they were to limit the pool to the cards that are there now, cards get nerfed and buffed in ways that could end up breaking duels, and then they have to go in and make balance changes. And they like I was referencing we talked a few weeks ago about the numbers from Firestone, where they were showing like how many players were, or how many hours people were playing each mode, and Duels was just above Mercenaries PvE slightly. It was above Twist, which is, that's something, but it was, but like Ranked Wild feels like the you must be this tall to ride sign as far as modes that are going to continue to get additional support, and Duels wasn't even close. And like we've kind of talked through, when we've had balance changes, it hasn't been that often. When we've had balance changes, they've generally been lengthy and involved, and we, being very engaged players, really don't even know what those changes are doing a lot of the time, because if you're not very involved in the Duels meta, then you just don't really understand what those changes are. But things break, and break spectacularly, and then that mode ends up becoming fairly condensed, especially because of the very small player base. So there's a very small player base that are playing very broken things, so you're seeing a lot of the same things over and over again, and then that has to get patched. So it's sad. I mean, it's a mode that I know I've enjoyed quite a bit off and on, but I could also see the argument for that's a whole other set of code that has to continually be maintained when the code base is already very large. And then there are cards that need to be designed for or banned, and somebody needs to be testing for some of that stuff ahead of time to figure out if there are things that need to be banned, or if treasures need to be adjusted, and that's just resources that could be put into making the game better, and focusing on having less code to be maintaining, which hopefully will keep the rest of the bugs a little bit more under control.
Yeah, someone in chat says something that honestly feels pretty much exactly the way I felt about the Valve card game, which
Artifact.
Artifact.
Yeah.
It was my favorite mode. It was the most niche mode with the highest barrier to entry, and that's how I was with Artifact. It was my favorite card game, but it was the most niche with the highest barrier to entry. I love doing the drafts, but Duels, obviously the gameplay is the same as Hearthstone, so that's not where the barrier was. It was more just the deck building and the collection restrictions. It was like it had rotation stuff to keep up with the same way that Arena does in terms of, well, what's even in right now. It had, unlike Arena, collection barriers in terms of whether you own the cards. And because of all the balance stuff, there was constantly changing, for treasures and hero powers and, certain card interactions with hero powers or other things. Like, there's just so many knobs, which I think is why people loved it. There was a lot of complexity, a lot of, if you really learned the system, and you almost had to have Firestone open, like letting you know what your bucket options were going to be after you pick certain things. You almost had to have that add-on to play optimally in terms of, picking. And I think another thing I heard was like, the meme about if there's a tavern brawl where I have to build a deck, you don't play, right? I generally have always been the opposite, where it's like if I hear about a deck building tavern brawl where it's interesting, I want to play. I mean, that kind of is because I'm usually that niche player, right, who likes the complexity. But a lot of people just bounce off those things. And so Duels, I think, just took up so much dev energy that to a point here you mentioned later, after Atesh and Matt London, who love the mode, moved on from Hearthstone, then there's no one to kind of back it and push it. And if I'm thinking about, if I were hired as a dev and they were like, here, can you balance Duels? I would be like, this isn't what I want to be doing. This isn't why I became a dev. And so, and to hire someone specifically to balance Duels, it doesn't have the player base to justify that.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
Duels has been, I think it's important to note, it's not that it was really big and it died, right? The entire 3 years that it's been here, you can see in the, at least according to the Firestone data, which if anything is probably likely to be skewed toward Duels, because again, if you were a committed Duels player, you really kind of needed Firestone specifically. It's just had a pretty low play rate the whole time, which is a shame because when I have played it, I've really enjoyed it. But I think it is a mode that if you wanted to be competitive, there was a lot of detail that you had to keep up with. Also that the devs had to keep up with. Like it's a technical challenge to maintain. It's also a design challenge to maintain. Even more so than Wild, and we know that Wild has been enough trouble. And so but even just as a player, if you want to be competitive, there's such a huge gap between what you're going to put together yourself, not knowing all of the behind the scenes details and the meta versus what you're going to run into. That's true in standard Hearthstone too, but I feel like Duels was even more unforgiving on average. But even if you didn't care, you're just playing casual, whatever, I'm going to run into things that just beat me because these people know what's happening and I don't. You can't save your deck. You can't just learn one thing and jam it every time it's different. And I think like there are people who really love that, and I think it was a really cool thing about the mode, and it's trying to be kind of roguelike where you're building something a bit different every time. But in some ways, even as someone who does like roguelike card builders, it was not the one that most drew me in. I do think, for people who've been dedicated playing this mode or people who've been making content around this mode especially, I absolutely feel for that. But I also think it makes sense from the devs side that this requires, I think if they were to really put all the resources into it that it would need and like maybe make UI updates where they make it so that you can see the buckets in the client and stuff like that, that would help. But the return on it would be putting like as much resources into it as they do into standard for probably a much lower return on investment.
Yeah, and just to hammer the point home about like the kind of work that needs to happen with design, like with balancing, like the dual class characters also throw a really big wrench into things because they create ways that you can build your deck that you can't do in any other mode. Like there is a 2-card OTK right now with Shadow Touch Faldir in Elise. Shadow Touch Faldir is the 1-drop that says your next healing spell does damage instead. And a very old druid card called Tree of Life, which is a 9-mana nature spell that says restore all characters to full health. So you just get any amount of armor before turn 10, and then you play Shadow Touch Faldir and that, and the game ends. And it's like, who's testing for that? Like, who is testing for that when you're making Shadow Touch Faldir, right? Like, nobody's thinking about that. Nor should they. I don't want anybody to have to spend brain cells thinking about that. And like this, like Duels, like we had Atesh on the show, and like this was clearly a labor of love for Atesh when he was doing it. Like it came out very clearly. We can link that episode in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to it from the time. But like you could tell from talking to him that he just loved Duels a lot, and he put his heart and soul into it. And Matt London too. Matt London had a lot of love for that mode as well. And both of them have moved on from the team. And if you don't have somebody who really, really loves the mode and can advocate for it, then and it's got a very low player base, then this is the right decision. Like you're not going to force somebody to love this mode the way that Atesh did. I just don't think you're necessarily going to find somebody like that again.
And I think it's important to note that like all this that we're looking at, Firestone data, they have the backhand numbers, and they're going to be looking at much larger gaps, right, in terms of between people playing other modes versus people playing Duels. And while there may be enough player base to support some number of content creators creating content around Duels, and I don't know if it was certainly in the case of Regis, like I don't think Duels is his only thing. Maybe there's enough of a Duels community that are dedicated enough that it makes good videos for Regis. But to the company that has to devote its dev time and everything to a massive player base, it doesn't make as much sense or any sense for them. So, and I want to point out another thing you can see from these graphs is Arena, they have put effort into, and you can see the effects. Like they have paid more attention to Arena, and it has been, getting these changes. They brought back the early access to cards in Arena, when new cards are coming out, at least for big expansions, and where that did not necessarily have an impact in people playing duels, it has had an impact in people playing Arena again. And some of those folks stick around and say, oh, hey, Arena's pretty cool. And they mention here in terms of the sunsetting of duels that they might, kind of maybe to save some of that work, bring the treasures, like where you get maybe one treasure that you draft during your run for Arena. And I think that's kind of cool, a way of like, okay, you can still kind of have this. And I think having a treasure could be fun for Arena to mix it up, get to do some crazy stuff without it being, quite as wacky as duels sometimes got with like the multiple treasure synergies and things. And they'll have to find the right balance of, which ones are fun but not too powerful for Arena. I mean, there's always going to be those sorts of issues, but Arena has been in the game since release. It is how many people started their Hearthstone journey, where we played limited Magic, and so we played a bunch of Arena when we first started playing Hearthstone to like work on that collection. So Arena, I don't know, I'm pretty sure isn't going anywhere, and particularly now that it has a pretty massive player base
and growing.
Yeah, but duels hasn't been there since the beginning, is so labor intensive for the team. I mean, I felt for a while, without pointing a finger at duels specifically, I definitely have felt for a while that it's like, I kind of think there's too many things in here, right? Like in Hearthstone, like it's on the one hand cool that people have stuff to do, but they seem spread thin, and it seems like they definitely were.
Yeah, I remember Ben Lee when we interviewed. I don't know if it was when we interviewed him or if it was in a different interview. Described Hearthstone at the time. Ben Lee was the former game director who was responsible for Mercenaries, and he described Hearthstone as less of a game and more of a platform for Blizzard card games.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like we're moving away from that vision, which I think is a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously Battlegrounds is something that is incredibly popular. That's not going away. Arena is a different way to use the same cards, and it's popular for different reasons, and obviously Constructed is there, but we're not trying to make Hearthstone into tabletop simulator for Blizzard card games, which I think was the direction that we were going in 2021. And it's definitely made the client. I mean, the client's already 10 years old, right? And that comes with its own challenges, even if you're just doing a single game in it, but we're still supporting a multiple modes. And that's just going to make it exponentially more challenging the more code you put in there. So, like, sometimes the best way that you can support something is by cutting out pieces of it. And it's never fun, right? Like, I have to do that at work too, where we sometimes retire things. It's like, oh no, I use that tool. Like, okay, but you're the one person using this tool, and we're going to have to show you a different way to do the thing that you're doing, because it's which again, you can't do something different like that in Hearthstone, but it's like you have to sometimes cut off the pieces that aren't being used by very many people in order to make the multitude of people better supported. They do this all the time also with, like, when they drop support for a particular phone OS, right? Like, there are some people with old phones, it's like, sorry, you can't play the game anymore, you're going to need to upgrade your phone because your phone is ancient. And it sucks because there are people who are going to be affected by that. But you have to make those kinds of hard decisions sometimes, because otherwise you just end up getting crushed under the weight.
When I think about, I have a smaller, other totally different subject matter podcasts that I do. And at one point I was like, this is so much effort, me trying to make this work on podcatchers that are not Spotify and
Yeah.
Apple Podcasts, and Anchor got bought by Spotify, so it's got all this integration stuff. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. These are the two biggest podcatchers that like I use and know of, and they're the easiest ones for me to make it go to. So I don't mean to be exclusive to them, and maybe it does still show up on some other ones that I just haven't realized. But it's just it feels like so much extra burden for probably a handful of people that I just was like, yeah, I'm not. Can't do it.
I mean, this is definitely, there isn't really anything else in the client that's quite like Duels, and so I think it really is a shame, and it's something that had me looking at it like, every time that I did remember that Duels was there and I played it, I had a good time, and I know there are people that is their main mode, and there's definitely roguelike card builders, but not one using constructed Hearthstone cards after April. There is also Battlegrounds in a way is a Hearthstone roguelike, but not with constructed Hearthstone cards. And it's not the same itch. I completely understand. Like, none of the modes are the same itch. But as you're saying, I think it's a very understandable decision that was made, and I do hope that it sounds like they're not trying to make a bunch of new modes for us. They're trying to really take the modes that we have and make them good. And we'll see what that means for Twist, whether that's something that they can revitalize or not. That's a whole nother discussion we don't necessarily want to get into today.
Yeah.
But, this makes sense, and it's unfortunate, but I also understand why a maintenance mode just isn't possible given the fact that the cards are changing.
Yeah. I mean, like, they can just, like, leave Mercenaries in there and never touch it, and no harm, no foul, right? Like, that code's never changing again. And Duels is always going to be changing if they leave it in.
And I hate to say it, but probably Mercenaries still makes them some amount of money, even with a limited player base, right?
It's still in the shop.
It's still in the shop.
and still, saying, deal for this or that or whatever. Like, I think the PvP is probably dead, because once you just struggle so much to find an opponent, like, you don't do it anymore. I mean, that was why ultimately, even though I liked Artifact, I stopped playing Artifact. But I'm sure some people are just like, they kind of got hooked. They play Mercenaries solo things. There's not updates anymore, and they just sort of do it because it's their mobile game. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Well, maybe there even is a still small number of people who do the PvP. I don't. But
who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. The fact is, it effectively like is a static game that just exists there.
It just happens to be in the client. Yeah.
If it gives them money every once in a while.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not even going to download it for you anymore if you don't actively go into it. So, but yeah, so you'll have Duels until April. If you do want to, pour one out, you can still play your Duels runs. You can use your tavern tickets. Your tavern tickets are also good in Arena, so you can use them there. You're not going to lose those. But if you do want to do some more heroic runs, go ahead and do that. Just, April's when those are going to go away. We had an interesting report that came in over Christmas week that Blizzard may be re-engaging with NetEase in China. There was apparently a 1-year suspension after the deal fell through, and now there's rumors. They don't really have anything more than rumors, but just that there's talk of that happening. And if they do that, it's probably going to take over. They're saying it's going to take over half a year to start everything up again. But I have to imagine this has a lot to do with the fact that when the deal was ended, Activision owned Blizzard, and now Microsoft owns Blizzard, and Microsoft has a lot of better relations with a lot of companies in China through their workings with Azure and everything like that. So
yeah.
And Microsoft was very clear, or Activision rather was very clearly looking at nickels and dimes, and that's just not the way that Microsoft tends to operate. So
New line of social credit. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, but that gives, having a change gives new confidence that maybe a negotiation might be different. And they have a quote in this article from the Global Times of Mike Ybarra saying basically, I want us in every single country around the globe, China included. So we
Yeah.
don't know if this is going to happen, but it seems it may have been reopened.
and like,
I mean, yeah.
it's a massive market. Like, yeah, yeah, you want us in every country, China included, because it's a ton of people. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was baffling to me that this was allowed to fall through in the first place, because I gotta imagine it was just a loss of so much revenue, because it was all their games. And
Yeah.
you know, selfishly for Hearthstone, like, it feels weird doing a world championship with China just not being a server, right? Like, the only way a
Yeah.
Chinese player could qualify for Worlds was by being able to play on a different server.
Yeah.
It
And
sucks.
like every like free to play games are a massive market in China, even more so than in any other region. So like Hearthstone, that was a massive part of its revenue. We've seen a lot of the bot increases are really because, or at least partially, so that Chinese players can rebuild their collections that they lost on the China server.
Mhm.
We've heard that for sure. I mean, Warcraft Rumble is just cut out from the market and not able to, make any money in that market, whereas other games from like Supercell or whatever are able to take advantage of that market. And that's big a big deal. Like there's been, I keep seeing Old Guardian post out like a status report once a month on how much Warcraft Rumble is making, and spoiler alert, it's not as much as you would think it is. I mean, it's still like he had to make it top 21 strategy games on mobile in order to get it on the list instead of top 20. So I'm sure that they would like a lot of that revenue from China to be there. And it does seem like gross mismanagement, which I mean is Bobby Kotick's middle name, basically. So I'm not surprised. But yeah, it seems like this would be a no-brainer to restart this, especially with Microsoft leading negotiations now. So hopefully that'll happen. We'll be able to get the China server back in. I just want to see their decks again. Like their decks were always very interesting and brought a little bit of spice things. I mean, Gion still tweets things that Chinese players who are playing on other servers are doing, but there's just like, you have to jump through so many hoops to get that to happen. And that, including like buying cards and other currencies and stuff like that, I would like it to be easier for them so they could be part of the community again.
Absolutely. It just helps the whole game.
Yeah. So speaking of legend players, we had a lot more legend players than we usually do. There's a report from Neon31 on the Reddit, the Hearthstone subreddit. Neon31 is the person who runs HearthstoneDex.net, and he just collects the stats every month just normally. And we had 132,000 players reach Standard Legend, which is 44% more Legend players than the previous month.
That is worldwide.
Worldwide. But it's almost exclusively in Asia, which is what's interesting. So the actually let me get this up on the screen, because this is, I didn't put this into my other browser, but I think this graph is worth looking at. So yeah, go ahead.
If we just look at the numbers here, so the standard numbers on NA this month was almost 23,000 compared to about 20,000 last month. EU also went up by about 1,000 there. But Asia last month was 41.6 87,000, and this month was 85,000.
Yeah,
So that doubled.
Yeah, it is. You can actually see it. I'm trying to get it to fit on the slide, but it just looks like a hockey stick for Asia. It's kind of silly, actually, like how quickly. And I'm not sure if like something happened that caused it to like this spike in Asia specifically, but it is a massive spike, and NA and EU are more or less the same. Like the whatchamacallit, the numbers, just the raw numbers are versus November, December versus November. NA was 22,800 versus 20,475. And that's like a regular bump that you'll see when you have a new expansion. Like that's not really unexpected. EU is 24,280 versus 22,937. So again, reasonable. Asia was 85,000 versus 41,700. It doubled. It more than doubled. So, except in Twist. Twist is the only one that didn't have like a huge growth like that. It only have 569 versus 554, but you know. But it was the only one that grew. All the in NA and EU we had fewer Twist legends than we did in November, but in Asia that we had more.
So is there an explanation for this? Like, was there a country that previously had not been part of the Asia servers that now was, or because it just seems really weird.
If we are able to, I will definitely, as I'm sure all of us keep looking at, not that I don't know any, I'm seeing in this thread various speculations, but I don't know if we really know why. Apparently this is the first time that there have ever been more than 100,000 players reaching standard legend in those 3 servers combined, if you exclude China. So, but yeah, I have no idea what happened there.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I could think of is that the reason that they were on NA, the bots, for a long time is because, and the Chinese players also, was because the currency conversion, I believe in Argentina specifically, was so favorable that was the cheapest that they could buy their cards. Because ultimately, if you have to buy your, if you're going to pay money for part of your collection, right, to rebuild your collection, you're going to want to do it at the most favorable exchange rate. So then they did a currency, they revamped all the prices a few months ago, and they ended up jacking the prices up in like Argentina and Brazil. So it might be that wherever is most favorable for them is now in one of the APAC countries, and then so that's where they're going to play, right? Because that does seem like that's China, but I don't know why in the last 2 months, because they didn't do a big revision like that unless there was some big exchange rate changes or something.
Well, so I know such a drastic increase, I feel like almost suggests, and some people have mentioned, I don't know if it's been checked, if some of this is bots, but yeah. I wasn't aware that like standard bots could do that well, like to get to legend. That is surprising to me.
I suppose if you're facing more bots, you have a higher win rate as a person.
Yeah,
but it seems like a huge increase to be explained only by that.
Right.
Yeah, that seems like not like doubling the number of legend players seems like there has to be more of an explanation than that, I would think. Unless like the bot population just absolutely exploded and those bots themselves are good enough to get at MMR where or to get at ranks where you're playing against them from Diamond 5 to Legend.
Right. Like, I mean, I know it's not that straightforward, but if somehow someone figured out how to teach bots how to play Treant Druid really well, right? Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. it's one of those weird things where it's like this almost seems unaccountable, like in terms of just being people. Like that seems crazy.
Yeah. I don't know, but it's a mystery. Maybe we'll end up hearing about it at some point, but it's a thing that's happening. So, it's not it's definitely an anomaly, something in whatever's happening over there in Asia, but we do have a little bit of happier news. Well, I don't know about happier news, but we have Heroic Tavern Brawl is live. So if you have disposable gold or disposable income that you would like to spend on it, you are welcome to do that. It is live until Wednesday morning Eastern time. Wednesday 1 p.m. Eastern is when it closes. The rewards are the same. There's no cosmetic. The real reward, aside from the friends you made along the way, is the ability to post a screenshot on Reddit with your 12-win deck. If you are not going to be doing that, the rest of the rewards, if the rewards actually are something that you would be able to make use of, chances are you shouldn't be playing for them. So do that as it will. Make sure that you can afford to lose whatever gold you're going to put in, because if you go 0-3, you've spent $1,000 for 1,000 gold for a pack, which is not a great price for a pack. But you're doing it more for the experience. So,
and we are likely to get the mini set soon. So remember, if you want to buy that with gold, you want to save a couple thousand gold, or at least close to it, so you can earn that back up. Unless you are like Edelweiss and get so many packs that you don't even need to get the mini set for the past several expansions.
That's always a fun little game. Is like, see how many packs I can get leading into the mini set, so I can just open packs to get them all. Thank you, Duplicate Protection. Yeah. I've only done one so far, and then I started a new one. We'll see. I do feel like the meta this time around for Heroic Tavern Brawl is maybe not quite what I normally like for doing one. And there is a slight hiccup that I alluded to earlier, in that Pyrotechnician is not presently banned in Heroic Brawl. And that makes me nervous, because it's bad enough to lose to Thaddeus Warlock every once in a while because they just have the thing and I'm not able to disrupt them, and turn 6 I die. But I don't want to lose to Pyrotechnician Druid. No, thank you. And I can't even practice playing it on ladder to try it myself, because it's banned in standard right now. So, it's this thing where I would have to practice the Ignis version to try and do the part of it, but not the main thing, which is the Pyrotechnician part.
Yeah.
And of course, someone already hit 12 wins with Pyrotechnician.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point, right? I think those people who are doing that are the people who are already playing Fire Druid before the expansion, or before it was banned, which is not very many people. It's probably Language Hacker and the one person who posted the 12-win screenshot. So I don't think you're likely to run into too many of them, but I guess just don't be surprised if you do. But yeah, I can't imagine spending $1,000 gold to try to learn Fire Druid.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. That's not a good use of my gold.
And
you probably will see Thaddeus Warlock.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we'll talk in a second about changes. But I mean, I am the way that I tend to approach these, because I don't tend to do. I'm not necessarily as consistent in this type of format. Sometimes I do really well, other times not as much, and I didn't get a double bundle this time, so I spent more of my gold just getting enough. I actually still don't have quite all the legendaries, but I just have plenty of dust to craft whatever I need, and this is how I always used to do it, and it works well, but it means I don't have a lot of gold left over for brawls, so I'll probably do at least one, probably Naga Priest, just because I know it, just because that's even, I don't know if it's necessarily the meta, but I know there's druids, we can beat druids. And also probably would have done more if it wasn't for the shop updates. They had Mecha Anduin and Mecha Illidan for 1,000 and 1,500 gold respectively, and that was most of the gold I was saving for Heroic Tavern Brawl. I just impulse spent immediately.
Yeah. You can see that the screenshot I have up on the stream is from my account where Holy Leviathan Anduin has been purchased, which happened immediately. It is one of the only acceptable Anduin skins, along with Teen Idol Anduin and Little Lion Anduin. Those are the only acceptable Anduin skins. I will not be taking questions at this time. But you could get those two and Shadow Moon Gul'dan from, which I believe was a Book of Mercenaries era portrait, for 1,000 gold. Well, you could get Anduin and Gul'dan for 1,000 gold or $6.99 US. The Illidan is a bundle with a card back, so that is 1,500 gold or $10 USD. And then the legendary Arthas portrait bundle is back in the shop. You can always buy just the portrait for 2,500 runestones, but they put the bundle back with the 5 Death Knight packs for 2,500 runestones or $24.99. Every so often, you have someone complain, why is this a plus 20% value? Because it doesn't exist anywhere without. It actually does. You can just go into the collection and buy it with runestones, but here you get the packs with it. The other thing that they added into the shop are a number of set-specific bundles with signature cards. So there is for the last 4 sets that have signatures. So Badlands, Titans, Festival of Legends, and March of the Lich King. There is a regular and a golden signature bundle. The regular bundle is 3,500 runestones or $35 USD, which has a signature card from that set, a golden legendary, I believe, also from that set, and then 5 regular packs. The golden bundle has 10 golden packs and 2 signature legendaries from that set. So if there is a particular legendary that you're looking for, like, I don't know, Sif.
I got it.
I know you did. I know you did. But
actually, I am weak.
That almost ended the podcast when you didn't have it for a little while. So
So you know what happened again, right? I got signature Pip, and you have signature Drilly.
Yes. I know. It is.
Anyway.
It is absolute. That signature Drilly is 100% wasted on me. It is a complete waste. It is very sad.
I
was actually thinking that, like,
trade.
Oh right, I have the signature Drilly, and I don't want to play this card at all.
Please give me the ability to trade signatures.
If only we could bring back the Diablo 3 auction house for Hearthstone. Please don't do that.
No, not auction house. Just let me trade you, Wicked.
Just a trade. You can't buy it. There's no economy around it. It's just a
of course.
trade.
It would.
That would still end up with an economy
exist
around
third
it.
party.
Yes.
I know, which is depressing. But anyway.
Yes.
I am weak, so I got the 2 things, and I still missed on getting Drilly. So we'll see what happens when I finally open the packs for the mini set. If then I get Drilly, but I don't remember. I already had Pip. I got
Popgar?
Yes, that was one of them. And then maybe a neutral. I forget.
Pip is the only one that I have right now. But I'm happy. That is like the only one that I would regularly be playing anyway.
Yeah.
So the universe got one thing right.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I got
good use of the Pip one because of the Astral deck that No Hands made. But
yeah.
And Naga Priest is okay too. But yeah, I want Drilly, and I wanted Drilly from the start because I actually play rogue. I have become the rogue player on the podcast. I don't know how this happened.
Pat left and somebody had to fill his shoes, I guess. But and it's funny because the 2 that I have are Popgar and Drilly, and I have no interest in playing either of those decks. And ironically, I don't have signature Raden, but I still get to play with it a lot because Diamond Elise summons signature Raden. So I still get to play with signature Raden every so often.
I have signature.
I don't know.
I think this is. I think Blizzard's just trolling us. I think this is Korra's fault somehow. I'm pretty sure that we can blame Korra for this somehow. I'm not sure how, but but I guess we've stalled long enough, and we should talk about Rogue because that's what we signed up to do. So let's go ahead and do that.
All right, so we are talking about Thief Rogue, aka Mining Rogue, aka Excavate Rogue, whatever you want to call it.
Minecraft Rogue.
Minecraft. You know, you're the one who's really leading this discussion, so you can call it whatever you like.
I call it effing Rogue. Is that acceptable?
We can just say Rogue also.
Okay.
For here, because it's really there is Mech Rogue, but we do know what Rogue we're talking about. And the main structure we wanted to do was Edel will teach us how to play this deck. I definitely made some notes and structure, but my win rate with this deck doesn't really qualify me very much. However, I have an okay win rate against this deck, and Steve has an even better win rate against this deck because he's been playing Dragon Druid, so we will definitely talk about what to do if you are not the Rogue player as well. But first off, we want to talk a little bit about like what is kind of the elevator pitch of what you're doing in this deck. It's not as obvious as some other decks, and then also what kind of lists are we looking at when we're talking about this deck.
So I think as people have come to know, you know, VS talked about this deck. It's the most popular thing on ladder. And I think a big part of that is because Discover is fun.
Is it?
No, you discover things too. They're just out of my deck. Anyway, so there is a lot of generation, and however you may feel about that, one thing that is true when it comes to Discover is there is skill to that. And the biggest element, I think, is matchup knowledge, which is part of why, you know, some players do really love these rogue decks. They feel like they can discover their way out of any situation potentially. It does have some bad matchups in, you know, things that are able to heal up, just clear constantly, or in things that are able to puke a bunch of stats that require very specific answers to, and it's kind of a make them have it or not moment. Dragon Druid can do that potentially a couple times, right? And so whereas they might be able to find point removal here and there, it's a lot harder when you just sort of force the rogue to deal with a specific thing. And we have here two lists. I'm trying out the Ike one in the Heroic Colosseum right now. Is Cuts Concoctions, which seems blasphemous for a rogue, but it does make some sense. You get to be more focused on just the excavates, your primary game plan of, you know, having some things that give you cards from other classes to activate Valorok. Valorok, I think that is the biggest reason that this was put on the map, because you could do the Shatter Shambler into Scourge Illusionist for a Drilly thing before. We could do that before the Valorok change, but people weren't doing it. The other thing they changed that definitely has helped it is they buffed the Scorpion, right? The reward for excavating. But I think that is almost a like red herring. Like it throws you off. That is not the biggest reason this exists.
It was like adding the stats to the minions from Elise, right? It was enough to get people to try it again. But then Valorok is really, I mean, it's better. It's certainly better than it was before. But the Velorok change, especially because it can come out as early as charge out as early as turn 3, along with breakdances and shadow steps or whatever. That feels like it's a more impactful change, but at least you can play the spells relatively early from the Scorpion now, where you just would have them sitting in your you would have them sitting in your hand from the first excavate, or you'd have to wait to go through a whole second round of excavates, which you can do. I mean, Shadow Step and Breakdance exist, and Drilly gives you, whenever you do that with Drilly, he gives you 2. So,
Right.
you can get there very quickly, but it doesn't happen all the time.
The people who were trying this, right? That was one of the things, right? You try and, you don't play the first Scorpion until you have done enough excavates that you would get the spells, and then basically everything costs 0, and you just go in on Draka, which was a thing that they specifically said they didn't want to happen. They didn't want, with this buff, they made it not less than 1, so that people would not just be excavating for the purpose of having 4 free spells for Draka, right?
Yeah.
Now,
And-
sorry, go ahead.
This is a different kind of generation deck than a lot of generation decks we've seen. Like the previous one where it's just fueling Draka, that's almost kind of your Shadow Reaper Anduin. Like we're just generating a bunch of stuff for a very specific payoff card. Or we're just generating a bunch of things so that the Naga Mage train keeps going. And there's a lot of skill involved in how do I make sure the math all works out for this and have the right thing that I'm making. There's also generation to just get lots of value in control mirrors, which I think is the kind that you're most comfortable with, Wicked. But this is generating undercosted tempo.
Right.
And answers to buy you the time for it if you're facing like a Treant Druid. Or a Naga Priest, you just, if you're facing a Naga Priest, keep them off the board, and then while building your own board, excavates are great at that. But yeah, in this case, the generation kind of is the point, but you can't just generate anything. So that is part of what makes the deck actually harder to play than it seems when you're just seeing it on the other side going, why do they always have the perfect thing? They could have picked the non-perfect thing easily.
Sometimes it is as simple as, well, their Excavate 3 gave them Collapse, and now you lose because you're a Treant Druid. But other times, yeah, there's a lot more work. When you are discovering a 5 cost, discovering a 3 cost, discovering a 2 cost in the various Azerite treasures. And on top of discover a quick draw card. Some people, and this kills me, but they play Stick Up on 1, and I'm like, it's a quick draw card. What? Why?
What are you doing? Yeah.
Now, but it does make sense in circumstances. The highest win rate card in the deck, Velorok Windblade. If you can play Stick Up on 1 and just play a Heat Wave on 2, or some other 2-mana quick draw card, so that you can Velorok on 3, that's definitely the right play. Because Velorok on 3 is filthy. It is a 3/6 charge. You can discover a card, any card from another class, and it costs 3 less. That might lead you into a turn 4 Kolak. That might, give you something free that you can play that turn. It can find you removal. It can find you healing. Like, it is tricky, but there are bad discovers from Velorok. They've been kind of few and far between from what I've seen. And it's the main reason that people run Breakdance. So, when Zacho was talking about this deck, he was like, I don't like Gear Shift, I don't like Breakdance, take him out. But I think there's reasons to have both of them, even if they aren't the highest win rate cards. Gear Shift, if you don't like drawing patches, then you probably want to have Gear Shift in your list. Or at least Finley. Because, Finley was one of the things that he proposed putting in the list. I think it makes a lot of sense for these lists. But Gear Shift is kind of the, shoot, I kept Scourge Illusionist because it's the number 2 win rate card in the deck, but then I drew patches in the form of Drilly. Gear Shift lets you, do a little extra work to be able to make that thing still happen, right? And even if the opponent kills the Scourge Illusionist on their turn, it's still an extra 2 excavates and you get a 0 mana Drilly. So if you have any of the return it to your hand things, this is kind of another reason the Breakdance is in there. If you get a 0 mana Drilly, even if it's not quick draw activated because your opponent killed the Illusionist on their turn, then you can play it for 0, Breakdance, play it for 4, or, play it for 0, Shadow Step, play it for 2. So there's a lot of ways to get a lot of excavates. That being said, you don't want to bounce Scorpion unless you have to.
So some of the pulls are
excavates-
so bad from Scorpion.
the excavates in some way are like they're part of what you're wanting, not just
Right.
trying to turbo get Scorpion as soon as possible and then repeat Scorpion. The excavates are really valuable, especially when you're fending off something that's more more aggressive, but a lot of them help you kind of build a board and recover. The 4/3 Divine Shield lifesteal, you still end up
that's so
with
good,
4/3 on the board.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
3/7 taunt that has reborn and can't be targeted, like that's defensive, but also it's a thing on the board that you're going to be able to attack with almost certainly, because how are they getting rid of that?
Even the 2 cost 1 that drops another 2-drop, as long as the 2-drop that it doesn't drop is Doomsayer, which I
That's
have
always
won a
funny.
game because of that, which was fantastic. And I think specifically on Breakdance, I think that the Ike deck is actually built to take better advantage of Breakdance than like the Vicious Syndicate list even before they cut Breakdance, because you're also running Tess, which is a really good breakdance target also, both because of the effect and it's a big body that you can rush something into. You're running Antique Flingers, which is the 3 mana 4/3 that if you've excavated twice, destroy an enemy minion. So now that can turn into a 2-for-1 if you breakdance, and then you get to do it again after that. So in addition to the usual things of Drilly and Ajara and Krakatoa, remember that if you bounce Ajara, the spells get reset. You have to play those again. But so like in a deck that's a little bit more value focused like Ike's, Breakdance makes more sense. In one that's more tempo focused like the VS list, then you have your Breakdance targets are really Drilly, Velorok, maybe a Krakatoa in a pinch. Right, and even then, you don't really want to a lot of the time because you still want to be able to get the attack on the weapon later without having to play it again. But everything else is kind of for Breakdance. So it you have to look at how your deck is built and decide how you're going to do that. But also, if you're not running concoctions, that's room that you have for the breakdances as well.
Yeah, and I think you're sacrificing some of the more consistency in ability to fill in the gaps from Potion Belt, right? Whether you get destroy a minion or draw, or if you do need a card from another class, you can pick the blue potion. So, but one thing that often happened to me playing Potion Belt or having big Putricide turns, you fill up your hand pretty quickly. And actually, you kind of want to empty your hand so that you can play Scorpion or do excavate a bunch, do various things. There have been times where I've lost because I couldn't empty my hand and I needed a potential out of whether it was Scorpion or excavating the right things. You don't want to be in a situation where you are just dying because you have too many cards in hand, right? Like that's embarrassing. One of the big reasons I like Finley is so that times where you play Scorpion and you're like, oh, this all sucks. then you just turn it into the other half of your deck.
Yeah.
And now you're in business. You can start the excavate chain again. But yeah, it's much more about excavating more stuff than it is about playing Scorpion a bunch of times. And sometimes people do that and it works out for them. And sometimes the only way you can get an answer to what you need to deal with is from playing more Scorpions. But I would much rather get more Scorpions from playing a bunch of Drillies and excavating a whole bunch than by bouncing the Scorpion. And by excavating more, it also means that the next Scorpion you get, if you do pull an expensive spell, it'll be much cheaper.
I mean, Scorpion is basically an 8-mana Prison of Yogg-Saron that you only get to
Yeah.
do once, right?
Right.
I mean, that's really what it's doing, because like Prison of Yogg-Saron's just going to cast 4 spells. Like, yeah, you get to target them, so that's what you get out of your extra mana, but you're really spending 8 mana for 4 spells that are completely random. And
Right.
that may not be, if you wouldn't play Prison of Yogg-Saron in that scenario, you might want to think a little bit harder about playing Scorpion.
It does give you the 5/5 body and
Yeah.
not discard your hand with tome tampering, but
Unless you
yeah,
want to.
it's not necessarily the most. You can't necessarily be guaranteed that it'll get you an out or that it's going to be the most pressure. And so, yeah, if you've played Prison, then thinking about it that way gives you a little bit of a sense of like what might this do, and you're going to have to pay some mana for those things.
So I want to get into some card usage here. So we talked about various approaches to the list and inclusions or non-inclusions. I think Ike's version was a bit of a nod to people kind of targeting the other one. Tess gives you a lot more ability to go the long game against either more controlling things that are trying to run you out of stuff, or if you're able to discover ways of clearing stuff, maybe Tess, or in emergency escape scenario, he's got Prison. I took that out, but that stuff could theoretically help you against a dragon druid. Maybe not if they have the nuts ramping, but it's that little extra possibility. And Antique Flinger at 3 mana is quite good. And if your potion that you were discovering was to destroy a minion anyway, Antique Flinger does that, and you can return it to do it again. So,
And you can target it. You don't need to. You need to hope that it's going to hit the right one.
Exactly. So, yeah, you basically, like the name says, you are excavating a bunch. And now excavate is random. It's from a fixed pool, but you kind of form a game plan based on the things you excavate. Sometimes you get rock and I think stalactite and collapse, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of damage. That's 9 damage. Well, okay, if I have all this damage, then my discovers, my things from Kashmite Creation, my things from Stick Up, well, I kind of want stuff, right? I want minions, things that I can put in play. I think particularly if you're running a version with Tess, you want to prioritize minions because you'll get those back from Tess.
Yes.
Whereas spells that don't say enemy, you don't know if you're going to be killing your own stuff. So if you can help it, the best thing to breakdance is Valorok, and Valorok is far and away the best card in the deck. The reason people are running 2 stick-ups and 2 Kashmite Creations is to be able to activate Valorok as quickly as possible. Prep, I think, was like the number 4 mulligan card with a low keep rate because it just accelerates your game plan so much, whether it's, you get to excavate 2 and then you can prep out that Azurite treasure, or because you want to be able to prep out something that you discovered off Kashmite or Stick Up, and then be able to play Valorok on 3. So games where you can Valorok early and keep Valorok alive, those are some of the most just snowball out of control games, because it's you can discover based on the situation exactly what you need. You can usually add to so much pressure. The 3 mana discount is insane. We're talking about nerfs. Initially, I had thought, oh, make the stats worse. No, they should probably make it require 2 cards to activate, because this thing coming down early is backbreaking. It would be better if it was easier to kill, but it
needs to not come out so early.
Yeah, it probably should be more of a reward for committing to the archetype rather than just, oh, I played a stick up, I played a Kajimai creation, and what came off of it.
And
Yeah.
And this is something, by the way, that they have said that a change will be coming to Valorok, although probably, and this part is more speculation, almost certainly not before the mini set, just because they very rarely would patch in that type of window.
Yeah.
And we have a heroic brawl going on right now, but likely, or they are for sure looking at that card for changes.
They have rarely done balance changes in a content patch, not often, but rarely. But also when I look at the stats on HS Replay, Mining Rogue is 24.36% of Legend over the last 3 days, or the last day rather, and it's or last day or last 3 days. So, they might want to do something about that. I would even be okay, by the way, with 3 cards this game as opposed to 2 cards in hand, because like the reason that people didn't want to play Valorok before is because you had to basically, if you didn't have Valorok and you were playing the cards from other classes, it felt bad that you were like wasting them because you weren't able to use those to advance Valorok. So I would be okay if you just made it this game but made it 3, and I think that would probably be okay.
Yeah, I think that's the change I like the best. You know, you could split the difference and say 2, but it has to be in hand. But the 3 but checks from deck, I think is kind of a nice, like, okay, you have to commit to this, but it sees it from anywhere. So if you draw it later in the game, that's fine. It definitely will make it not the crazy high mulligan win rate, I think, because it takes time to play those activators, and so you're gonna want those early.
Especially because like 6 health is so much, right? And like so most decks do not have a way to deal with 6 health on turn 3. Like it's just not there.
The 6 health clearly was designed for a card that's coming out later, and that also smooths out the mulligan. So, and I do also really like the checks from deck, because then otherwise you get the problem like when you top deck a Handmaiden and you have no spells and you're like, oh god. Like, when I first made a Naga Priest, I cut Handmaiden because I hated that moment so much. And that was wrong. Handmaiden is good, but it feels so bad. So I hope they don't just revert it. I hope that they come up with something that tones it down, maybe tones the play rate down a bit. Clearly, this is a deck people really want to play. But I don't think we need to. I think it's fine for it to be something that people can play, but nerfing it a bit will hopefully nerf the play rate a bit. But not so much that it doesn't work anymore or that it feels terrible.
Like we said 2 weeks ago, it could be a 45% deck and people will still play it a lot. So just not at high ranks.
I think the problem is this is a deck that appeals to a lot of top players, but they'll also be very unhappy if they can't play it because the win rate's too low.
And I think kind of most importantly, the Valorok win rate is 61% in the mulligan. That's too high.
That's Doc Holiday numbers is what that is.
Yeah. It can be a powerful and cool card without it being that high of a mulligan win rate. And it basically ends up being one of those things where you build rogue decks around how can you maximize Valorok. So, but Valorok tangent aside, the other, of course, powerful thing that you're looking to do in terms of mulligan win rate, Scourge Illusionist dies, gives you a 0 mana 4/4 Drilly, very powerful. That is the number 2 card, regardless of whether or not you have a Shatter Shambler. Shatter Shambler is the 3rd mulligan win rate card, and because even if you don't have the Scourge Illusionist, you're probably going to find it later, and so that is very helpful. Or even in the unfortunate scenario where you draw a Drilly, not Illusionist, at least it's 1 cheaper, and you get the 3 Excavates right away. And a lot of times that's enough, right? Getting the first Scorpion can be powerful enough.
Do be careful with the Shamblers. If you discover a Death Rattle weapon minion and your Shambler is active, it will die.
Yes.
So make sure you intended that to happen.
Yes.
I did get an Ozumat, and was surprised when it died immediately and cleared my opponent's board. That ended up being a good thing, but it was
Yeah.
not actually what I was thinking about when I played it. And the random colossal takes me to Queen Ajara, which is something that people started including in lists and I think has become kind of core to the deck. Not for colossals. Maybe if you have tests, right? I think that's the big reason to go for a colossal. And I think people for the longest time have been so tunnel visioned on Queen Ajara as for a colossal. And, sometimes you do something else. Queen Ajara in this deck, the situation you want to be in is Queen Ajara for Naifu, because that dagger will get you a Pyroblast, basically. And if you just think about Scorpion gives you 1-mana spells. Even if they're terrible spells, if your opponent is low enough, every single spell is dealing 2 damage. So when you can Queen Ajara for that weapon, and maybe some of your Excavate cards are, a rock or other things that deal damage. Never remember the name of that 2-mana one. But there's potentially a lot of damage out of Excavate stuff. Sometimes you get the gold pouch, right? And so that's 3 activations on the weapon very quickly. Like, there's a lot of situations that this deck is able to just play a bunch of cheap spells, and so you get that 10 damage. That's why I think what you want to prioritize with your discovers when you can is stuff that gives you pressure, right? Whether that means, you cheaply answer an opponent's board in the case of you're against Treant Druid, or oftentimes it can be worth it to discard a prep or a shadow step just because you need to play the 3/3 rushers, right?
The tram.
Because you just get a
trolley
couple of
problem.
trams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes you can play that quick drawn, so you don't even have to discard. But there's, a decent number of ways of just getting stuff out there. And that's the position you want to be in, is you want to be pressuring your opponent, because the ways that I find you end up losing with this deck are when you are having to rely on your random generation, your discover, to get you out of situations. If you're like, I need to find healing, I need to find a board clear, I need to find removal, that's where you start running into trouble, because you can't be as flexible. I need to find pressure is usually a little easier to make happen. And, definitely you want to be the one pressuring.
It's easier to make happen if that's what you're thinking from the beginning, that you're
Yeah.
trying to do, and you're using your minions and you're using your excavates and stuff, not only to just keep yourself safe, but to build up whatever kind of board you can, whatever kind of pressure you can. Even if you're facing an aggressive deck, if you have a board to counter, most of it makes it even harder for them to rebuild a board. It makes it even harder for something like, if they have some kind of plan B late game, they may not have time because their health total is too low. So while definitely if you're versus a Treant Druid, you want to be finding ways to remove their stuff, that's still easier if you are able to have some sort of board.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I think is, to the extent that you can, you want to be planning out your turns. So if you get a gold pouch, you want to think about how best to utilize that. Is it going to be just 2 mana to get out, your 2 mana treasure that you just got because it was a drilly? Or do you use a gold pouch on an earlier turn so that you have access to coin because you're going to need flint to find you something, right? There are ways where it's like, okay, well, normally you'd think this is pretty early to play a flint, but the fact that I have 2 coins from this pouch and I have a prep in hand means that I'll get actually a decent number of rolls, even though it's only like turn 6, right? If you're trying to find something in particular. And flint, especially with the buff, so that shadow stepping him costs 0, is really good.
Just know that that's what you want to do and start with him, because you're going to get the value of with him if you have as much mana to play with. There have been a couple times on stream where I've gotten annoyed at rogue players that I've been playing against who have like done something and then they flinted after that, and they played a stick up and then they played flint. Like, what if you're getting a quick draw card, just start with flint, and then you can always, I mean, and I understand that it's a discover and that like maybe they whiffed and they didn't get anything good, but also just like, if you're starting the turn with I'm going to do something random, why don't you start with flint and see if it does anything and then go discover the thing, because if you can get more value out of the flint that way, right?
And so to that end, you want to know the pools, right? You want to know what quick draw cards you can look for, right? Maybe you start with flint and immediately it gives you the dragon, the most expensive one, usually the worst one. And you're like,
that's what happens to me every time.
Okay, that's not it. You know, at that point you say the discover a quick draw card so you can find your viper or whatever, right? The, you know, poison and immune this turn, that one can be pretty insane for me. There's also plenty of times where, you know, heat wave is really good, or the warrior one would deal 3 then 2 then 1. There's a decent amount of clear, and there's also the ability to get like Azerite chain gang, right? 3 taunts, right? So, or the Tram one we mentioned for a couple of 3/3s.
Yeah. Silver Serpent's also really good to just remove a minion. That's the 3 mana hunter one.
Right.
It's a 2/3 beast, rush poisonous, and
That's
immune
the one I was
with quick draw.
And sometimes it just sticks around. That's really aggravating to face. Like, they get that out, and then you're like, I still have to kill this thing.
Yeah.
Snecks, man. Snecks are just like ruining everybody's day in this expansion.
Yeah. You know, there's Rehydrate, which, of course, particularly out of Flint, you're sort of like, oh, great, 7 healing and refresh 2 crystals, so I can, you know, keep the chain going. There's sort of a lot of versatility in the quick draw cards, but you do have to kind of have a plan and know what you're looking for a particular situation. I usually play Flint when I want an answer to what my opponent's doing, because then I am not like sad when I hit the paladin tradable one where it's like turn a minion into a 1/1 quick draw, deal damage to it. I'm generally not playing it when all I want is board, right? I think it's more likely with the discover a quick draw that you can just find something to put some minions in play. It's more likely with Flint, you know, in the mid game or later game, that you can try and clear a board, right? Because you can chain together a bunch of quick draw things to potentially clear. And so just knowing the right tool for the job is a pretty big part of the deck.
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding you right, is that the right way to approach this deck is not turn your brain off and let Yogg take the wheel.
Yeah, definitely not. No. That's
I tried
gonna
that.
lead to some 05s.
Yeah, I tried that and it didn't work very well. You know, I was like distracted by other things going on, and it didn't work very well, as it turns out. So this is, you know, something that Pocket Train talked a lot about is, you know, decks that are high in discovers. You need to just have a lot of mechanical familiarity with the deck in order to really be able to play them well. So if you're just starting this up without that previous practice, you're gonna need to be paying attention.
Another card that some lists have been including that, you know, I might end up leaning towards myself is Cult Neophyte, just because if you are trying to do things like pressure out a Thaddeus Warlock or Druid or something, you can know, okay, this is the turn where they're going to try and pop off. So I need an extra turn to try and kill them, right? Like, you still have to do the earlier work of doing your best to put on pressure so that you can kill them, because that's just the only way you're going to win for the most part. It usually takes too long to try and generate a call to the stand or something. So you want to be pressuring, and Cult Neophyte lets you kind of open that window a little wider, particularly with stuff like Shadow Step, etc., so that you can potentially say like, actually, I'm going to keep you from comboing off so that I can get over the finish line.
And that can help even again, it's clearly very useful against a Thaddeus Warlock, but as you're saying, it's useful against a lot of decks to just slow them down a bit.
Yeah,
I mean, Treant
again, you
Druid's
have to
mostly
know-
spells. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you have to know when to use it. Can throw Treant Druid off in terms of making them play off curve. Can throw off, an Odin Warrior if you know they're going to want to sanitize a board, and you're like, okay, use something else. So I think there's definitely a lot of merit to Cult Neophyte. It's not in all the lists, but I think has been increasing in popularity. I'm partial to Krakatoa. I definitely saw some lists on Ahirun that were just like they curve topped at Scourge Illusionist, right? I think that Ajara and Krakatoa, I like the game plan of sometimes I do want to just play one thing, right? And Krakatoa is great for that because it's one thing that clears 3 things or clears 2 things and goes face. And, great for pressure, another good bounce target potentially if they let it live. It's perfect for both kind of coming back if you're a little bit behind or snowballing some pressure into like working towards that lethal. And then you are either a prison person or you're not a prison person. Ike, I guess, is a Prison of Yogg person, and so it's in the list. I swapped it for Finley.
Some people just want their tomes tampered with, and it just is what it is.
Yeah. And then if you don't like Gear Shift but don't want to be able to draw patches in the form of like just Drilly, you can include Pozic. That's another good one that can kind of mess with people in terms of pretty solid as a 0 drop, right? Getting it off of the Scourge Illusionist. If you're just playing Pozic along with whatever else you're doing that turn, that can be powerful. Particularly people aren't generally expecting it. So, you can throw it down and make them burn a card, various uses there. But so that's a lot about how to play Rogue and, me trying to convince folks that it's not just a Yogg Take the Wheel deck. Why don't you two help us out with how people can beat Rogue?
My favorite topic.
Well, I can start talking more from the aggro side, which of course I've mostly been playing Naga Priest, but this also applies to like Treant Druid. We have some people who've been playing, aggro paladins, the Sludge Lock, not the Thaddeus Lock, but the one that's being played as it was intended to be played by the devs. Mech Rogue. I would imagine also Astral Automaton Priest, although I haven't actually played that yet. But
No Hand says that it's like 70% into Rogue. Yeah.
It's pretty good, yeah.
That is actually in a better position. That's almost more like the Drum Druid, which also does pretty well into Rogue. I was asking the people who've been playing that over in the server, how is Rogue? And they're like, Rogue can rarely deal with it.
Big board out of nowhere. Tough to deal with.
Plus you get to play Shard of the Naru. So,
Shard of the Naru is definitely helpful, although not as helpful as it is versus Druids, I will say. Yeah. Especially because against a Druid, you can really just wait. You know exactly what you're going for. With the Treant Druid, you're waiting for Cultivation. With a Dragon Druid, you're waiting for the Dragon Golem. You need to be in a position to take advantage of that Shard where you can lethal them after you play it because they still have a board, but they no longer have Taunt. But that is not Rogue. Sorry. So if you're playing aggro that's not favored, it's because they're pretty good at removing your boards while keeping a board. If they're using their excavates right, especially. But you want a sort of consistent, sustained pressure as much as possible. It's threading a balance between, you can't just play, it's hard to know how to not play into removal, so I tend to keep a little bit in reserve if I can, try to force something. But you do need to pressure them because eventually they will outvalue you and do a bunch of damage to you. So if, I try to make like things that are awkward to multiple different excavation cards, or, they just have a little bit of extra health. But there's like 2 or 3 of them so that they're not so easily cleared by one thing. If you're a Treant Druid, you want to try to have the God, what is this called? The one that gives the death rattle that it resummons, or
Soul of the Forest.
Soul of the Forest.
Yeah.
If you're a Naga priest, you're spreading your wigs out to try to keep it so that it's hard for them to remove everything. And do keep an eye on your own life total, because sometimes they just sneaky get you down. You're so focused on the aggro. You want to pressure them, but if you never trade and then they remove your stuff and then they still have a board, you're just like, well, I can't even get back on the board now. So if you do see a really good value trade, like, don't be as afraid to take it as I think I was when I was starting to face rogues. And I also would prioritize draw a lot, because you do need to expect. I think part of the key about tilt for these is that, just like with a control deck, if they're at low health, you can't assume they're almost dead. Right? Like that's just the road to madness, is something Hat likes to say, and I think is accurate. Versus when you're facing a thief rogue, you can't assume that they don't have an answer. They might not have an answer. Sometimes you have to just hope they don't have an answer. But in your heart, you have to know generating random stuff is what this deck is for. So if I can have reload, if I can deal with the fact that they might be able to deal with this and have that in the back of my head. Again, sometimes you can't, and then you just go all in. But remembering that is a thing that this class does, and that this deck in particular does, and that is to be expected. Them getting your Aman'Thul is not to be expected, but mostly. So yeah, I suppose a lot of this was just a little bit of it depends, but it is worth playing a little bit of this deck yourself, even if it's not really your style, also so that you do get a sense of what is their removal that they consistently have access to, if they've played certain things, what are they probably going to have, and just how do they lose, because if you're only playing against it, it can get very tilting.
Yeah, I'll talk to Control in a minute, but Dragon Druid is the other thing that I played against it, and Dragon Druid is very straightforward. It is probably one of the best decks into Rogue. You ramp, you play Dragon Golem, and you go next. Like, that is the plan against Rogue. It is. I had 101 degree fever, and I was farming rogues up to Diamond 5 on Tuesday, and you just play the deck the way you're going to play the deck, right? Like, you're not doing anything special against Rogue. You're basically removing stuff as you need to, but you're not going, nuts about it. And you just play your game and make them deal with it, because ultimately they have to get through your Dragon Golem, and if they have to generate specific things that are probably coming out of the Scorpion a lot of the time, unless they get an early Velorok. If they get an early Velorok, there's not always something you can do. If you miss ramp, then, but if you miss ramp, you're going to lose to a lot of things. So there's a reason Splish Splash Whelp is still one of the best cards in that deck, and it's not close in the mulligan. So you just play the deck you would play against anything else, and just make them deal with your stuff. But don't make it, you sometimes do need to trade, but it's amazing how much damage you can just put out from a Dragon Golem that doesn't get dealt with. Just ends the game right there.
And then just make sure that, okay, I've got him at 8. I've got Alex. Just need to get there mana-wise. Right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
There have been so many games where it's just like, I dealt with that, but I think I'm gonna die because I'm at 8. Like,
yeah, yeah. Just remember your burst, Alex. Whatchamacallit, Aquatic Form into Sunken Gardens to get the rest of the damage if you have a Dragon Golem that's stuck but isn't quite there. Just like the normal things that you would do if you're playing Dragon Druid. You're probably already thinking about these kinds of things, and you just remember that they're there. So I looked up my stats at the end of the month for Reno Priest, and I was 15-4 against rogues over December rather. It didn't feel like it because the games against rogue are very long and very annoying, and you don't feel like you actually won anything at the end of them. But it is very good because you have a lot of removal and a lot of what you're doing. I can speak to the Reno Priest, which I know is not a meta deck. It's just my little pet project. But if you're going to play something like a Blood Decay or something else, like this probably transfers a lot of it. What you're doing is you're making sure you don't get blown out early, and then stabilizing once you start having your answers, and then just you should have answers for more or less anything that they can do, and then you're just waiting for them to run out of gas, which does happen. So some of the things that I have, I've tacked my deck for Rogan Druid specifically because those are just, especially at the end of December, those were the only two decks I was seeing, was like Treant Druid and Rogue. Drown in particular is very good where it normally isn't, because if you can get rid of a non-Shatter Shamblered Illusionist, or you could just take Drilly and then put him at the bottom of your deck, then he can't hurt you anymore. So that's pretty good. I mean, silences are also pretty good. I hold on to Shard of the Naru. You still need to be able to remove the minion because they can Shadow Step, but they don't always have it and they don't always want to. So you're just trying to keep it from getting to a point where you're just getting absolutely blown out by a whole bunch of things that you don't have enough mana to deal with. Generally, by the time I get to like 6 mana, I've more or less stabilized, and then it's just a matter of just dealing with their stuff or defusing it. And you can't really line up answers against a deck like that because you don't really know what to expect, but you know the kinds of things to expect. You don't necessarily know if they're running Tess or not until they play it and bounce it once, but that's the kind that makes it a little bit harder. That was the game where I needed the 2-drop Excavate to puke out a Doomsayer in order for me to get through it, because I didn't have an answer otherwise. But you know, sometimes you get lucky, right? But you're just kind of waiting for them to just whiff. Eventually, like, the way that randomness works is that it regresses to the mean, and if they have really good rolls, they're also sometimes going to have really bad rolls. And you can't let the good rolls tilt you too much to the point where you're not giving them an opportunity to have a bad roll. What you're looking to do is, once they do whiff, you're trying to present, again, similar to what Dragon Druid is doing, you're trying to present a big board that they can't clear quickly. In Reno Priest case, that's Elise. I mean, I will take Elise off of Creation Protocol 9 times out of 10 anyway, because it's one of the most powerful things you can do. But certainly having a board of 5/5/5s that either also can remove things and or make more minions, in the case of Raden, is extremely powerful. There are other things you can do in other matchups. You know, being able to get a Mograine down in Blood Decay, I'm sure, is very good. There's not really a whole lot of other control decks that are out there right now, just because.
I mean, space for the Odin. You know,
Odin too. Odin's the other one, right?
Drop.
Yeah, so like Odin's not going to present a board, but it's going to get Odin down. And then once you get Odin down, then you get to flip the switch. So you're just basically trying to hold them off long enough to get your Odin down, and then you get to be the aggressor, and they're the ones who have to worry about keeping their health up. So it's just, you just need to, the biggest thing at playing a control deck against this is emotional management. And I say that being someone who struggles with it quite a bit, and my feelings about Thief rogues in general have not been a secret. I don't like them. I don't like when they're competitive. I hate playing against them. It takes way longer than it ought to end the game, but I mean, I did a lot more often than not end the game in my favor against them. But it's just a matter of keeping yourself calm and just not getting tilted by them pulling out the perfect answer, because it's just going to happen. But that doesn't mean that every time they generate something that it's going to be the perfect answer. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just get high rolled off the planet and it happens, but it's not going to be every game. And like, there's a lot of ways to whiff, and you just need to give them the opportunity to do that, and then you can capitalize on it.
Yeah, in both from both directions, it's kind of giving them the opportunity to whiff. Except for a control deck, you go long enough,
Yeah.
they'll regress to the mean. For an aggro deck, you say, can I deal with them having it? If not, I'm, saying maybe they have it, maybe they don't. In a way, it's helping you do what Pocket was talking about last week, where he said at a certain point you can get in your own head playing around things.
Yeah.
In Rogue, you kind of don't know what you're playing around, so you can't get in your head playing around
Yeah.
things too much.
Yeah.
But you can. People
You
do.
can.
Right.
Certain things like
Yeah.
Bone Spike, that's a thing that you know that they have. Ways to deal with 3 health minions in general.
Mhm.
That's a thing that they have many ways to do. So definitely you are thinking about trying to make awkward boards for sure. But you're also just thinking what are just generally good ways to make tempo and reload.
I definitely beat rogues with my Rainbow GK because I would prioritize dealing with their stuff and building up corpses, and then in the mid game I would go Corpse Bride and then Stitch Giant. And that was sort of my version of Dragon Golem. A little
Yeah.
potentially easier for them to discover their way out of, but I could, potentially do that again in the form of like Corpse Farm and stuff. So just being able to say, hey, look, bunch of stats out of nowhere, deal with it. Okay, do it again. And then also having my own tools of, removing their stuff. I actually was running crop rotation in that list. And of course, you have the finisher at the end of Climactic and Necrotic Explosion, which can either be big damage or, another big board that they have to deal with. So, yeah, you definitely want to just sort of make them have it, because with its generation, it's, even less guaranteed than draw RNG.
And that spike is actually important. I say hold back things if you like hold back just a tiny bit to like have some draw or have something to do next turn if you think that'll help, but you don't want that to turn into I'm just dribbling out threats slowly. That makes them way more likely to be able to deal with them. If you're doing that, you're doing it so you can really spike in a way that you're really okay. Now you really have to have it as early as possible. But that spike of the Dragon Golem, that's hard for them to deal with. The spike of the Stitch Giant is hard. If you can save a Volition and then get a couple of really big minions with Serpent Wigs on 6, rather than just like dribbling a minion down every turn or 2 minions down every turn that are kind of meh, right? That's going to be more likely to be something that's hard for them to deal with.
And the only other thing I would say as a control player is just prepare yourself for a long game. They don't always go long, but they can, because Rogue is very good, not necessarily at handling everything you're doing, but stalling and finding ways to live another turn and then find something else to generate. And some of the games just like I was looking at my list from last month, and I have 2 games against Rogue that were not back to back, but like the 2 games against Rogue that were close together, that were 25 minutes and 23 minutes respectively. That is priest mirror lengths. So that is not what you expect always going into a Rogue, but they can just make the games go a lot longer even if they can't find an answer, because they're incentivized to just live one more turn because the answer might be at the next discover.
Well, I think we should probably wrap up. Is there any other parting words we want to say on playing Rogue, facing Rogue, staying sane?
Welcome while you got
Rogue?
Yeah, and do your best to manage tilt. The more you get upset about the randomness of Rogue, the worse you're going to play against them. So,
yes.
Yeah, if you need to take a break, do so. Some people just aren't playing right now. I respect that. Soddle is just like, yeah, I'm done until the mini set, because, it's just not fun. I do think as counters have sort of, more come out, that there's a bit less Rogue. I feel like I've been facing it a bit less, because I think some people are like trying it and then getting bodied by dragon druids and Odin warriors. So we'll see how that ends up panning out. And yeah, just do your best out there and try not to get too mad. But we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coinconcede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com, and write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you would like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Cub, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Grizzly Bear, and The Grand Arcanum. Coin concedes. Wicked?
Well, I'm going to coin concede to my wife, Maureen, who does not play Constructed like I do, which is most people don't, who are not also on this podcast, but she does play, occasionally when she gets into it, and she put her mind to it to climb in Standard this past month, and I did some coaching with her, and she kept asking me how much the Patreon cost, and I said you need to give me $20. But but I wasn't coaching her the whole time, and she ended up the season at Diamond 8, which is significantly higher than she normally goes, especially because she hadn't played in a couple months, and she was starting from a very low multiplier, and she played Highlander Hunter pretty much the whole way up. And I think she learned something. I mean, I coached her up to Diamond 10, and then she got the rest of the way up to Diamond 8 with a 1-star multiplier on her own. So she took some things out of that, out of those coachings. I think the biggest one is I had to say to her a couple of times, you have cards that are green in your hand, so hero power is not the correct play, which is something that I don't think very many people would expect me to be saying to anybody. And we almost ended one of the sessions when she insisted on staying in a game that was clearly lost against the Blood DK because it was now quote unquote personal. And I told her if we didn't get out of that game, that I was done. So, that we got out of that game, but she did pick up a lot of things, and she's, I mean, she hasn't been to Legend. She's been to Diamond 5 once, but, I think that I could see a shift in her play over the course of it. So, I think it's possibly within sight, especially if she's not feeling quite as demotivated from having to climb down from like a 3-star multiplier like she typically does, like having that work done and then being able to get back. Though I think she was not quite used to the improved caliber of opponent at the beginning of this month with an 8-star multiplier as opposed to a 3-star multiplier, because they were not letting her get away with some of the things that she was getting away with before. But she'll get through that.
That's always a tough thing. Your reward for hitting a new rank bracket is to face much harder opponents.
I'm feeling it in 11x this month, I'll tell you that much. So
that could be part of what was going on.
Yeah.
I have a couple coin concedes. One, World 8 finished at an appropriate 88. It just has to get up to that 8 one day now. An incredible finish, of course, but very appropriate. Also a coin concede to both my family and my partner's family for just being like really helpful and supportive and excited about the engagement. So I'm really looking forward to that. Also a coin concede to all the devs and community people dealing with people. People are very upset about the duels news, which I completely understand, and also am really sad to see the mode go. But I think there's been, I just coin concede to them for dealing with some of the memes and things can imply things about the devs specifically that are not constructive. They're not happy to see a mode that they've worked hard on not be supported. So, but I hope that this helps free them to feel like they can be less stretched thin and really do well on the modes that they're working at, and look forward to the mini set, which will probably be announced on the day after on Thursday, and then come out the next Tuesday-ish.
That's his tradition.
That is the tradition. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, and kind of in that same vein, I want to quick concede to all the duels players. I know I, did not sound particularly supportive earlier because I sort of feel like this is the right choice by the team for reasons we discussed. But I also recognize that if this was your mode that you loved, it sucks, and I'm sorry, and it's a bummer that they can't keep it going. But hopefully there will be something else that people will be able to find their fun with, whether it's you know the changes to arena or maybe some new mode that we haven't heard about. I'll tell you what, there is a mode that we have heard about, which is Battlegrounds Duos, and people haven't gotten to play that yet. It's awesome.
It's really cool.
Like, Spells came out and I have not touched BGs. I'm excited for Duos. So
Yes. We might have to have some co-op streams.
yeah, we can make that happen.
Well, but until next time, that's going to do it for us for this week. So until next time, keep calm and don't draw drilly. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.